Hello everyone, welcome back to Embroidery. If you're new here, my name is Ines and I love to share lots of things to do with building a slow handmade home. I really love upcycling projects and today is another one of those that I did just a little earlier in the summer and is actually a really great one for the rest of the summer for your children. In the past, I've shared a couple of ideas for transforming old adult clothes into baby clothes, and today is another one of those ideas, this time turning an old shirt into a two-piece baby outfit. This is a really quick and easy project and definitely doable for a beginner. I will say you need a large shirt for sure, and you're probably not going to be able to make this for a baby that's over 18 months old. My little boy is 18 months old and he was definitely at the limit of it, and you'll see in the footage that actually the trousers I had to make slightly too short, which isn't a problem for the summer, but if you want a good amount of wear from them, then I definitely make this for a smaller baby. Apart from that, I don't think there's much to say, so I will head on now into the tutorial and I hope you enjoy it. I started by removing the collar by simply cutting just above the collar stand. If you cut really close to the stitching on the collar stand, then you won't need to do anything to finish the collar later. I've used this technique thousands of times and it works really well. Next, I folded the shirt in half and I pinned a simple t-shirt pattern onto the top. This one that I used was actually a self-drafted pattern, but I will leave some links for ready-made patterns that you could use in the description. With any kind of upcycling project, you'll find the pattern doesn't always exactly fit the piece you're upcycling, because obviously it depends massively on the shape of the piece that you're using. So here I'm having to fold down part of the pattern to match the shoulder seam on the shirt, but it turns out okay in the end. And if you're ever worried about making these changes, take measurements of the key points and double check them against your child's measurements to check they'll fit before you start cutting. Often I find it just kind of all works out in the end, and you can usually, by checking measurements as the piece is cut, you can make sure that everything will fit together right at the end. You can see once I start cutting that I actually smooth out any sharp edges where I've had to fold the pattern down and make sure that it kind of all makes sense and will make a shirt that looks quite cute at the end. Then I moved on to cutting the trouser part of the outfit, and I cut down both side seams of the shirt so I could take just one of the pieces at a time. If you can hear my children in the background, I'm really sorry. They're having a lot of fun with their dad and I don't want to interrupt it, so you might hear some giggles in the background. So I took just the back piece of the shirt and folded that in half and then pinned the trouser pattern to the fabric. For the trousers, I'm using the Sage Pants pattern by Flora Child Co, and this is the best trouser pattern I've used for kids. I've made them countless times now and they always turn out great. As you can see, I was really at the limit of available fabric making these for my 18-month-old. So like I said in the intro, it would definitely be worth getting the absolute biggest shirt that you can, or just being happy that your trousers might be a tiny bit too short. Then I took the front piece of the bottom of the shirt and folded that in half as well, and used that to cut out the front leg pieces for the trouser in exactly the same way. So I'm just pinning the pattern onto the fabric and then cutting around it. Once everything was cut, this is what the top looked like, and as you can see there's not a huge amount of sewing to do, so I just need to hem the sleeves, sew down the side seams and then hem the bottom. I started by overlocking the raw edges on the sleeves, and here I'm actually using an overlocking stitch on my normal sewing machine, which I love for quick projects where I don't want to keep moving back and forward to the overlocker. It's fairly good actually at keeping the raw edges contained. It's not quite as good as an overlocker, but like I said, for quick projects like this where I just want to knock them up in an afternoon, it's a really great compromise. And this is what the stitch looks like, so it's pretty good. Then I just folded that overlocked edge down about 1 centimetre and sewed it in place with a straight stitch. As you can see, I'm not using pins here, I'm just measuring the seam allowance kind of as I go. And again, this is a great way to make a project a little bit quicker if you want to knock it up in an afternoon. Next, I moved on to the side seams and I used a 1 centimetre seam allowance, as I always do for children's clothes. I think it's the best seam allowance to use for them because it's not too big. And then I finished those seams too. Then finally I hemmed the bottom of the top in a similar way to how I'd hemmed the sleeves, so finishing the raw edge with an overlocking stitch and then sewing it down with a straight stitch as well. And here's what the completed top looked like. Then I moved on to the trousers, so here are my 2 front and back pieces, and I'll need to sew down the outer seams, then the inner leg seams and the crotch seam, and then finally sew the waistband. Here's what the trousers look like after sewing the outer leg seam, and then I sewed the inner leg seams just like this by joining them together. As an aside, the pattern I use for these trousers actually has pockets, but I don't think I've ever seen my 18-month-old use pockets, so for the sake of time I left them out, but you could obviously definitely add them in. Once again, I'm finishing the seams with an overlock stitch, and then this is what they look like. Now, if you've ever made trousers before, then you might have struggled with the crotch seam, but there's actually a really easy way to do it, which I'll show you now. You take one of the finished legs and turn it right side out, and then slide it inside the other leg. Then you can line up the 2 raw edges of the crotch seam and sew them together really easily. Then of course I'm just pinning that in place to make sure that everything stays pinned closer together around the curves, just to make sure everything's held in place really well. And you'll see once I start sewing this that actually I decided to pull off the bottom of my sewing machines that had the free arm available. Just because of the size of these trousers, it's actually easier if you can wrap the bottom part of the trousers underneath, so that's what I did. Here's what the trousers looked like with the 2 legs attached. So next I worked on the waistband. I'd already overlocked the top edge, so I just folded down about 3 centimetres at the top and pinned that in place, and then I'm going to sew it down with a straight stitch as I have everything else. But this time I'm making sure to leave a 3 centimetre gap at the back of the waistband, and that's just going to allow me to insert the elastic easily into the waistband. Now, if you've ever inserted elastic into a waistband, you'll know the frustration of losing the end of the elastic. So here's a little tip to help with that. I like to put a safety pin through one end of the elastic and pin it just next to the opening so that I don't accidentally pull it in. Then I'll attach another safety pin to the other end of the elastic just to help me thread it through. For waistband elastic, I cut a length that's 2 centimetres less than your child's waist measurement. once you've got the elastic through, you'll need to sew them together with a 1 centimetre overlap. I used a zigzag stitch, so I go once down and then reverse back, just to give it a really good amount of strength. Then I folded over that little bit of the waistband that was making the gap to get the elastic in, and sewed that gap closed, being really careful not to catch the elastic in the stitches. And this is how the finished product ended up. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial and that you were inspired to give it a go for yourself. If you enjoyed it, then you will almost certainly love this video here, where I transformed an old shirt into a baby romper. This is one of my most popular videos. It's a really simple and fun transformation that you will definitely love if you enjoyed this video. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye!